Know me. My name is Stacy Renee. I'm a mindset coach, a life on life's terms coach. And so we've been talking about things, and they all kind of align together. So what I do on Sundays is I create a story that maybe you can relate to as we go over what we learned in the last week, because I try to bridge everything. As a mindset coach and life coach, I had to have a life coach, and so I myself have studied a lot of things so that I could, be where I am. Not really be where I am. I don't know about all that because this is an adventure. This is an adventure. So it's not like there's a plateau to where you can grow. So that's what I like to get on here and help you with, is to connect with your soul, because life in itself, to me, is like a soul's journey. And so everything's divinely connected and holy, like mean like WHOLLY, directed. And so when we can realize that, we don't have to be struggling all the time. Sometimes we're doing fine and we may be struggling because maybe it's your central nervous system, your beliefs, your thoughts. So this is what we talk about on here, is how our belief. Hello, five elements. Bobby, how are you doing this morning? Did you have a good week? And now we're starting a new week. So today we're going to be talking about, these shifts that will transform your life from powerlessness to empower. There's three shifts that will transform your life from powerlessness to empowered. Because we have to realize that, when we're dealing with this side, there's always something on the other side. And I appreciate you all being here and being willing to learn that there's something else on the other side, and to, feed this kind of algorithm. So to all of you who subscribed, I appreciate you for subscribing. I appreciate you for suiting up and showing up so that we can all get together and talk about life, and, and through this life and all the changes, challenges, and chapters. Good day. Yeah, it was productive and a great week. Awesome. Good morning, Don, from me and Grinch. We are glad that you're here. Grinch is in his house right now, but maybe he'll come out and make an appearance. So I hope everyone's doing well today. And yeah, Sunday, it's a new week, and so we have some new possibilities. It's a new week and new possibilities. As the full moon is fading, as when I look at this full moon, I went out last night, was looking at the clouds and the stars and the moon, and I'm seeing the new moon, the full moon fading. And I think this is like those challenges, they're fading. See, because we have to realize that challenges can fade if we will allow them to fade. But some days we're just trying to make it, right? Some days we feel like we're just trying to make it. And so on those days, we need to realize that everything is changing, or it could be changing, but we have to be willing to look at the possibilities. So as we go into Monday, I like to talk about these possibilities that we're growing through. So the week, how, I was saying earlier that everything is connected. I talked about, are you a victim? And so some people have actually been victims. Thank you very much. I like the blues today too. So yeah. So some people have been victimized. Most of people, if you're breathing, you've been victimized by something. Sometimes it can be your own thoughts, because if you were verbally victimized, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, spiritually, there have been people victimized in those areas. And so sometimes that belief system from that victimization creates where we are at today. But we can change that. I had to learn to change it. My life coach, I call her my fairy goddess mother, because I would still be doing the same thing. But she taught me how to be brave and to be empowered and step out of those old belief systems. So this is what I try to help you all do. So today we're going to talk about 3 conversations that lead to empowerment, because that's kind of what we talked about this week, that victimization. And then when we feel powerless, because a lot of our feeling powerless comes from that victimization. And so what we realize is, when we have felt victimized, what we did was we gave power to that victimization that has created the belief system that we're not enough, or that we're too much, or that, this is just the way that it is. This is our fate. And so we have to change our fate. We're never going to do anything when we don't feel like we're enough. It's sometimes because we're trying to do stuff for somebody else and not ourselves. Because a lot of us, we're in this victimization taught not to think about and consider yourself. So we talked about taking your power back. I've got my notes here in case you all write something in the comments, because I do appreciate you all being here and I do appreciate your input. So thank you so much for being here. And so when we talked about taking your power back, it's not about controlling life and it's not about controlling other people. It's about controlling how to live powerfully, taking our power back, to look at those situations to where we thought that we couldn't do anything else. Because a lot of us, there's a poem by Marianne Williamson, Don. Yes, I was told if I didn't, I was being selfish. I know. So that's probably a lot of times this creates codependency, because then we do too much for other people because we think we're selfish, right? I know for me that created a lot of codependency. My intentions and motivations being skewed by being afraid that I would look selfish, because when your own parents or your own partners think you're selfish, then we try to adjust and adapt to these things. And so we may give away more. We may stay longer. We may, put ourselves in situations to where we feel powerless, that we feel like this is our fate, that we feel like, this is what I deserve. This is what I deserve. And that's not necessarily true. See, it's about learning ourselves. When we learn what our intentions and motivations are, because we all have positive and negative within us. Good morning, Rodolfo. We all have positive and negative within us. It's not just out there. A lot of times people, when they're in a negative place, they're being negative. But if we look inside of ourselves, if we look at our own thoughts, we may be having some negative thoughts and be given the power, Dawn. And then we get drained and our battery goes flat. Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll feel overwhelmed, frustrated, and exhausted, and all of that when we're over giving. So those are what we call the survival skills, right? Because we're always trying to prove something. But when we realize that we have nothing to prove, that you were born whole, you were born whole, you were born divine, and everything was fine. It's just that we learn to adjust and adapt to what was going on out there. And this creates our low self-esteem, if we indeed have a low self-esteem. But there's also a self-esteem. So sometimes we end up in conflict instead of in harmony with our self-esteem, because we go from one extreme to the other. I'm really extremely good, or I'm really extremely bad. So the real deal is when we're able to look at those survival skills. What did I do to survive? What was I doing for other people? Because I don't know about y'all, but I thought about that. In my codependence, I used to be like, because I would end up abandoned anyway. I don't know about y'all, but I would end up abandoned anyway. And so I would think when this happened, I would be like, if I put all this energy into myself, how badass would I be? Is there a difference between self-esteem and self-worth? Well, self-worth is an element of self-esteem, because self-esteem is like the initial part. Okay, if you have self-esteem, but it's all about considering yourself, right? Is that sometimes what happens is that people, when they're going from this extreme to the other extreme, we can mind mess with ourselves. I'm being nice with the language, but we can mind mess with ourselves when we're looking at this, because I have done this anyway, is that sometimes when we think, well, if I had self-esteem, this wouldn't bother me, right? If I had self-esteem, then I would be able to handle this without having feelings, negative feelings about it. And then there's the other part of self-esteem to where it's like, I'm numb. I don't feel anything, you know? So one would be considered, would be, I forgot what they're calling it instead of narcissism, but, one is the false esteem and the other is a low esteem. So this is what I'm meaning when I say we go to extremes. At least I'm sharing my experience. I'm not talking about, I'm a coach. I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. But from my own experience, we can go to extremes. I used to go to extremes. I would be either high up here, being like, I have esteem, that false esteem. Or I would be down here and be like self-loathing, like thinking, if I had self-esteem, I wouldn't feel this way, right? So it's about not mind screwing ourselves and to be able to feel our feelings and realize, is it true? Thank you for those hearts. Is Kimmy in the house? Is it true? There's a Rumi poem that says, is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? And so we need to sometimes channel our thoughts and feelings through this, because a lot of the things when we think negatively of ourselves, it's not true. It's an old tape. So healing requires us to look at the old tapes, how those old belief systems were gathered. Was that helpful, Rodolfo? How those old belief systems came to be. Some people grew up in what considered, and the story is going to tell you about that today. Some people grew up in what looked like a healthy home, where it looked like nothing's wrong. People didn't talk, though. So they didn't learn how to communicate and say what they want, needed, and desired, because things had to be uniform like that. Well, you're very welcome. And then some people grew up in a chaotic home. So when we get down to the stories, we're going to talk about how these different ways of growing up can mess with the belief systems that can create the narcissism and codependency and these kind of things, and how that can come together, because a lot of people end up in these type of relationships. I've seen it in the TV relationships even. They'll end up in these kind of relationships, and while they're not living a full life because they're living for somebody else and putting their all into somebody else while they don't feel like they're living fully. So when we can live in empowerment. So Monday we talked about powerlessness, right? So in looking at that, most people hear the word powerlessness and immediately think weakness. In my experience, the more perfect a family and home seems, the more screwed up it is. Well, you're going to like the story today, because there's a lot of things going on underneath all of that. It's about appearances, keeping it. There was a British show, I believe it was, called Keeping Up Appearances. And it was kind of about the false esteem and the falsities and just about how people looked, and things like this. And it really doesn't personal, and it really isn't touching, because everybody's just doing stuff because it's uniform, right? So most people hear the word powerlessness, like I said, and think weakness. And I know for me, when I first started recovery, that was the first time I had to really look at that word powerlessness, because I had self-sabotaging behaviors. And when we have self-sabotaging behaviors, I used to think I was a member of the Addams family. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. They're creepy and they're kooky. You could tell what I watched growing up. Yes, I occasionally watch that Keeping Up Appearances. Yes. So you see what I'm saying, Don. So it was funny, right? But it's not funny if you're living it. Like, we're talking about there, where people have to live. And I have some friends that, that they think you have to live up to certain standards of other people. And it's not that way. And I don't have to live that way. I don't live that way. I don't have to feel like I'm obligated to do, so that's not the way. But when I was in my codependency, I felt like everybody depended on me. And if I didn't do something, the world was going to fall apart, or at least my little world was going to fall apart. And so I had to learn that I can't possibly do everything for everybody. And I don't even need to be liked by everybody, and it's okay. And I don't have to dislike people if they don't like me. That's maturity. But in some of us in our wounds, we have emotional immaturity. And so I know a lot of people walk around thinking, I don't like them. I don't like them. We can have our preferences. But while we may not like something or somebody at this time, maybe later we're going to understand them better. I know that's happened for me. So when we talked about powerlessness, is that real empowerment begins with honesty. The only person that cares about what I like is me. Nobody else cares what I like, honestly. And so even Grinch don't care what I like, unless he's going to eat with me. And then he cares, because if he likes what I like. But anyway, when we admit we're powerless, that's things we can control. And we stop wasting our energy fighting reality, because we're thinking our reality is hinged on somebody else. It's not hinged on somebody else. Your reality is hinged on yourself. And you are navigating through this reality. But the problem is when we're in our survival skills, we're strategizing and anticipating through reality about what's going to make us feel safe. What makes us feel safe is feeling accepted. But sometimes we end up being powerless when we're trying to be accepted. sometimes we end up, when we're trying to be accepted, self-sabotaging. That's how mine started, because when I was 14, that's when I started smoking cigarettes because I didn't feel like I fit in. And so I would go to the skating rink and be smoking cigarettes with my friends. My dad smoked when I was growing up. I don't know, can't remember. I don't think he was smoking at some part. No, he was smoking at that part when I was 14. So, it didn't seem like a thing to start smoking. But so I smoked to fit in, social. And so, the things I started doing was so I could be social because I didn't know how to be social. I didn't know how to relate with people. I always was on edge as a child, even I remember trying to fit in. Well, not as a young child, like elementary school, I was not on edge. I would be beating up boys. Like I saw at home, there would be some fighting at home. So I would go to school and be a fighter at school. I would be doing things at school, that wasn't cool. It wasn't cool. When I got to middle school, I got more self-conscious about my behavior. Hey, Negan, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel and I hope that you'll, find this beneficial to you today. Benod, thank you very much for 250th Freedom Day for America. Epic. You smoke cigarettes for the same reason. Now you love the flavor. Well, thankfully, this month will be what would be my son's 34th birthday. And so I quit smoking 35 years ago when I was pregnant. And thankfully, I stayed stopped from then. I didn't quit smoking because of myself. Anything that I've done for my health was, because I wanted to live for my kids at first. Good morning, beautiful mama. Because that was the thing, was I loved my kids more than I loved myself. I didn't have a self-esteem when I had kids. So it was hard to teach my kids self-esteem. So if you'll have some grace and compassion for your parents, because if our parents didn't learn it, then we don't know it either. And it was a tricky thing that wasn't, back in those days, people were taught, from their parents to their parents to their parents. We didn't have Google, we didn't have YouTube. Thank you so much, Epic. We didn't have Google and YouTube and these things back in those days. We weren't inundated with this information like we are now. So our parents just did the best they could, as we do, if you're a parent, the best that you can. And there's no perfect parents out here. There's no perfect children either. That's the thing. So even if you're not a parent, you were a child at one time. So hopefully you can relate with this. But anyway, we have to stop, using our energy, wasting our energy to fight, what we think is reality. Like I used to think that. I've told y'all that when I first ended up in therapy, my what ifs were very catastrophic. And then as I was in there for a while, she taught me how to, change it to where I could think good things. Because I thought that bad things were my reality, but I had to learn to start thinking good things. So we realized that, no matter how codependent I was, no matter how much of a doormat I was, we can't control other people. And you know what? We don't know that we're trying to be controlling and manipulating when we are not being ourselves, but we are. We're trying to control and manipulate other people to like us. So the journey, we can take the journey to ourselves now, or we can take the journey to ourselves later. But we might be dust, but we're going to take the journey to ourselves. So I love that one of my sponsors in recovery told me, well, you can do it now or you can do it later. Because I've said also part of this recovery thing is, relapse. And most people, when they do relapse, it's because somebody dies or it has to do with another person usually. Sometimes it can be when good things are happening, when they feel like they've gotten to where they want to be and they have arrived. That's the most dangerous time because it takes so long to get back because they build up a false esteem that, oh, now I can do this. All right. So the only thing we can control is ourselves. We can't control the past. So if you're putting yourself on the firing squad, the butchered block today, because do you still go to the 12-step program, Stacy? I sure do. I go in there every Monday and Friday. In fact, I'm chairing one tomorrow. So I do. It's a way of life. And it helps to, I get to sit around people. This is how I learned to be so frank. is that I got to learn to be myself and sit around people because I couldn't save my face and my behind at the same time. So I would try to look normal even when I first got into the 12-step programs, when people would say, when I would go to people's houses, and they'd say, would you like a glass of wine? I'd be like, oh no, I'm driving. I couldn't tell them no because I drink all of Jesus's blood. Jesus will be anemic if I start drinking any wine. So I still was trying to be normal. Today, Mr. Simon Bitter, we're talking about three ways that we can, go from powerlessness to empowerment. So I'm glad that you get to be here this morning. So we're talking about, the things that we talked about earlier this week. I don't know if you got to, look at the other videos. We talked about Monday about being powerlessness. And what does powerlessness look like? So we can't control other people. We can't control the past. Thank you. And we can't control whether someone approves of us or not. Then we are deceiving ourselves and someone else too when we're trying to control that. We're compromising ourselves. We can't control life's timing, but we can control our response. And that's where your empowerment comes in. Greetings, Maglav. Rodolfo, I tried a couple of 12-step programs, but they only helped a little, not much really. That's funny. When I first went in, I looked at the steps on the wall and I thought, I like these spiritual steps because they're very spiritual, and I like that I had a God of my understanding, that I didn't have to, again, be like doing what other people told me I had to do because I have my own personality. And that's my connection with my source, So I didn't like this dogma stuff, but I thought these 12 steps look cool. But I thought, I'm not like them. I'm not like them, but addiction, whatever it is, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol, shopping, it is continuing and progressive. It's not going to stop. You just can't say, I'm going to make up my mind and quit. So this is why we have to admit we're powerlessness, because sometimes we call ourselves doing any of those things against our will. It's like, I'm not going to shop again. I still give myself sentences. I do. If I ate too much Bluebell ice cream, I had one of my clients do sentences the other day, not for punishment, for imprint. Because if I like something, if I like it too much, I can overdo it. If I do, most people skip right over making amends. I think that they don't know how, because we weren't taught growing up. As children, a lot of times we learn to say, I'm sorry, so that we don't get in trouble because we have earned guilt and unearned guilt, right? And so sometimes we just say, I'm sorry, just to get people off our behind. I mean, for real. And then we grow into adults. We don't just stop that because we grow into the mature bodies. So sometimes people just want to pacify you and will tell you you're sorry. Amends is different than just saying, I'm sorry. Because amends means that I acknowledge what I did. I acknowledge what I did. And I get to say, I regret my behavior. I wish I would not have spoke to you that way. I wish I would not have ignored you. I wish I would not have done this. I wish I would have been more attentive to you. And I apologize and I'll try to do better, because a lot of times some of the people that I work with are people who've been in relationships for over for close to 15 years, sometimes 20 years. And sometimes they do ignore each other. And so it's just saying, I'm sorry. And it seems like, right? And so, yeah, so epic. Ride the bike till you fall off. Yep. I find the only way out is through with the vices. Yes. Yes. And it's like a whack-a-mole because there's a transference of addiction too. Because once we get one addiction tackled, then there's something else pops up. So I'm often telling people it's like a whack-a-mole because a lot of times when people quit drugs or alcohol or any of those things, it turns into a shopping addiction because we will seek relief. We'll seek something outside of ourselves to make us feel better. But the best journey we can take, the best adventure we can take is to ourself, to get to know yourself, to thine own self be true. There's a lot of truth in that truth, So we can't control life's timing, but we can control our response. And that isn't weakness, that's wisdom. Thank you all so much for your input. I love it. You can't intellectual consequences. They must be felt. Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, Epic, because that is so true. A lot of people just think, hey, Branya, it's good to see you this morning. A lot of people think, I know we've missed you here. So a lot of people think that I can just, okay, I'm going to put a mantra on that, or I'm going to put an affirmation on that, and I'm just not going to do it. But you are so right, Epic. I had to feel it to heal it, because we are very smart people, but we'll feel stupid, or I did. I felt stupid because I had to feel it to heal it, and so I couldn't just think my way out. Now, I'm smart in my mind. I knew what to do, but your feelings, what do I say? Y'all know what I always say. What I always say is your feelings are expressions. I mean, your body language is expressions of your feelings. So when we aren't motivated, we say, I don't feel like it, right? So that's the connection. That's like, oh, so our motivation. And so that's how I learned to get in touch, through the steps also, Rodolfo, with my intentions and my motivations. This is, if you're in a 12-step program, like they go through the 12 months. So like this being the seventh month, we talk about our shortcomings. You've been unwell. That's why you have, oh, I'm so sorry. You've been unwell. I hope you're feeling better. Are you feeling better now? So in this, you've been asleep a lot. Oh, that happens. You need your rest when you're sick. So in the 12 steps, like on this seventh month, it talks about your shortcomings. And I've had to peel away, they talk about peeling the onion or peeling away all these things. And so in the seventh month, what my shortcomings was from the sixth month, the defects. So everything falls in order. So I'm glad you're a little better. Poco a poco, as we say down here, little by little. So the defects were my fears. So we've talked a lot in here about what our fears are, because not all y'all need a 12-step program. But we've talked about the fears. And then so the shortcomings are how we behave as a result of those fears. So if my fear is jealousy, I'm afraid somebody's going to take what I have, or take whether it's a man, a job, or something, then I'm going to be jealous. That's going to be one of my first feelings with that. So then what happens is that I'm going to have a shortcoming. So what am I going to do? Am I going to tattletale on somebody if it's the job? And I may have a valid reason. So it's not always tattletelling. But what am I going to do if I get jealous? So that's your action. So the fear is in my mind. But again, when we go with intention and motivation, the fear is in my mind, in my defect. So what do I do when I get in fear? Do I give somebody the business, or what do I do? So that's your shortcomings. So when I was working on my shortcomings, and it took different levels and layers, y'all, working on my shortcomings, I had to learn that to do the opposite of what I would normally do. And that took empowerment. That was empowerment, to do the opposite, because what's insanity? Insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. So if I wanted empowerment, I had to do something different. If I wanted something different, I had to do something different. And see, this is empowerment. A lot of us don't know that, though. So Wednesday, we talked about victimhood. Branya, I'm glad you're feeling better, but that double pneumonia and COPD, I'm trying to say two words at one time. That's awful. Sending you good vibes. Still in the hospital. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for joining us from the hospital this morning. Appreciate that. Yeah, that's terrible. Thank you for joining us from that hospital. So Wednesday, we talked about victimhood. And if you're breathing, which it's hard for Branya because she's been in the hospital, you're welcome. You're welcome, darling. Or he's been in the hospital. I'm sorry. I have a Branya that I follow here on YouTube. This is what happens. And that one's a she, but this Branya is a he. So that's why I messed up. So Wednesday, we talked about victimhood. If you're breathing, you've probably been victimized. So some of us experienced rejection, abandonment, criticized. We were criticized, betrayed, neglected, and abused. That's what victimization is, right? Abandoned, criticized, betrayed, neglected, and abused. Branya, oh my goodness. That's awful. Yeah, I know, Don. I know. But hopefully today you'll feel a little bit more empowered. So those experiences were real. So we're not trying to say this isn't real to not to to say that I'm empowered, because that's not real, because like was said earlier by Epic, we have to feel it to heal it. Was it Epic who said we have to feel it to heal it? Whoever said it? Yeah, you can't intellectualize. So yes, so we can't just intellectualize it and say I'm going to be empowered now, because if we don't feel the feelings of not being empowered, we won't know what's on the other side of those feelings. So here's the important distinction. Like Epic was saying, you can't intellectualize it. Being a victim of something is very different from allowing it to become your identity. This is where we think, I'm not worthy. I deserve this. And while we may not say that in our mind, we will second guess ourselves sometimes, because there's a part of you that knows you are worthy. And there's a part of you that's like thinking, because of the abuse, that you're not worthy. And so of being a victim, that you're not worthy. This is where you give power over them, is when you allow yourself to feel not worthy. So that's what the powerlessness part is that you've allowed somebody to let you feel not worthy, while your higher self, your connection to your soul, knows that you were born worthy, darling. So many of us unknowingly built our lives around protecting ourselves from ever feeling that pain again. And this is where we develop those survival strategies: people pleasing, perfectionism, control, avoidance, codependency, seeking validation. And those weren't character flaws, those were just survival strategies. So let's look at this a minute. What's on the other side of people pleasing? The other side of people pleasing is knowing that you are capable. You've done many things to please other people, and you are capable. But most people who are people pleasing don't recognize the great capabilities that they have from, what all they did to be accepted. It's about accepting yourself. Then you're going to be able to accept, well, look at what all I've done. I can do great things, but it's about knowing when to monitor yourself, when to consider yourself, so that you can consider, so that you can be acting out of not of obligation, but of that empowered self. Because how many of y'all know people that you think, wow, I wish I could be like that? Life teaches us what we need to know. All we can do is pay attention. A lot of us like to talk in class, though. Absolutely. A lot of people like to tell other people what they need to be doing. And it's like, there's John London. Hello. Good morning, John London. Well, it's afternoon for you. So a lot of people do like to tell other people what they need to be doing. I had those people trying to guide me through my life before, when I would be going through something and I wanted to be growing through something. When I would see somebody trying to give me, advice, who didn't have the kind of life that I wanted to have, if they weren't empowered and they're just trying to sit there, and tell me what to do, and even tell ourselves, yeah, yeah. So it's about, we have this information highway now. I learn a lot here on YouTube. I learn a lot in books still, obviously. Those are my besties' books, but I have my own books too. And so, we can learn a lot. We are not stupid. And so perfectionism, a lot of people may have grown up in a house that everything had to look perfect. But when we're perfectly imperfect, we realize, again, I'm capable. But I don't have to be perfect, because I was born perfect. So all of this is in all of what's on this side, the negative side, the empowered side is there too. What does it take to become a mod? Love. I don't know. What is a mod, Brunya? I'm glad you made it today, John London. And so control. If you want a management position at work, control can be good, but when we learn what we can control and what we can't control, that's where like the serenity prayer would come in. Oh, moderator. I don't have a moderator today, but so far everybody's doing great, right? So control, understanding again what we're powerless over. That's control, and so control has two sides to it too. So these things can have two sides. Avoidance Sometimes we need to stay in our business. If you struggle with codependency like I did, I had to learn there was my business, God's business, and somebody else's business. And I didn't need to avoid my own business. I needed to stay in my business. A moderator. Oh, someone who helps the host make sure the commenters aren't trolling the host and keeping them at bay. So what I do to have a moderator is I can assign somebody a moderator if I need to. We got a small group today, and all of y'all are amazing. You're hoping to catch a stream on your walk? Excellent. You're not sweltering out there today, John London. So the moderators, I've got like 3 women appointed as moderators and 2 men, none of which are here today, I don't think. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But everybody's cool today. I'm not having the trolls. But how you do that is you click on the name of the person you want to have moderate, and then it will say make moderator. Right? Right? Yeah. Most of mine have just said when they saw the trolls, because the trolls do bother them. And so most of them had said, that they would do it. And I like, yeah. So yeah, I don't think five elements is a moderator. If you see the ones in blue, they're a moderator. So avoidance. Sometimes we need to avoid certain things when we learn what are our healthy choices and our unhealthy choices. And like was said earlier, if we feel it, that's the thing is when we feel it. I work with people with weight loss, and so it's like, well, when we're making a healthy choice, it feels good. When we make a poor choice, an unhealthy choice, it feels bad. And so it's like, how do you want to feel? Because that's where your motivation is going to be. How do you want to feel? Because people say, I don't feel like it. Right. So when we get into sync with that, with our thoughts and our feelings, is I want this. And so what am I going to do? So I have to do something different, like we said earlier. So codependency. Codependents are very empathetic, but a lot of codependents don't recognize their codependency because of the empathy. So they'll be like, I'm empathetic. But the thing is they're not feeling their own feelings. They're feeling the feelings of other people. I know that because I was codependent. So I would be navigating and watching other people's feelings because I grew up in an addictive environment. So I knew when all hell was going to break loose. So I learned to anticipate the needs of other people growing up in that environment so that I would know what's going to happen next and I could prepare myself, right? So I would be strategizing and anticipating so I would be prepared. And I still wouldn't be prepared because I still would have, should have, could have on myself. You know what I mean? So seeking validation. Seeking validation on the healthy spectrum of that can be like acknowledging you're good. If you're going to apply for a job, a lot of people that I know, sometimes I'm helping people also apply for jobs. Thank you, John London. That's right. Thank you so much because I tell people that because sometimes my moderators will get, trigger happy here and I'll be like, but no, sometimes they do. Once they learn what the topic's about and stuff, they do. They become subscribers. So thank you, John London, for acknowledging that. So, seeking validation, if you seek validation within yourself, this is why it's important, like was said earlier, to feel your feelings, even if they're negative. And, I do the tapping. Grinch may come out now. I do the tapping so that we can validate our feelings because they can be yucky feelings and our higher self may know these feelings aren't facts. They're not facts because you have overextended. If you've done any of these things, you have gone above and beyond in relationships or in work or in whatever you're doing. And so, but the thing is you still don't feel validated. There's nothing, whether you're codependent or you're narcissist, there's nothing anybody can do until you feel it yourself. And that's the positive feelings too. The negative feelings, you have to feel them to heal them. And then the positive feelings, you have to be willing to feel them, but you have to know what's on the other side of them. Because sometimes that's why we think and believe that this is who we are. But we're also this other, the whole part, your higher mind or your divine mind. So when we understand that those weren't character, it's nice that you have the patience. Yes, yeah. 'Cause I don't know, about the trolls. I think some of them are like the prank callers like we had when we were, younger and stuff. You used to get on the phone and say, "Is this," you'd get people in trouble with their husbands or wives, you'd get have people thinking there's dogs, all kinds of things. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's our humanness, is when we can recognize I haven't always been so perfect myself. So when we're struggling with perfectionism, we are going to be trying to hold other people up to a bar when we feel like we have to be perfect. So we're having expectations. When we can turn our expectations into intuition. See, a lot of us think in that empathy that's intuition, and that's codependency, because you're feeling your feelings through other people. Trolls are the few that need therapy. Some of them really do need it, though, and they just don't know it yet. So that's why I like to address them when they do come in these lives. Is that, I didn't know I needed therapy or coaching or anything when I got it. I was like, but I did know that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's what I knew. So those were survival strategies. They're not character flaws. If you were seeking validation, the codependency, the avoidance, the control, the perfectionism, the people pleasing, none of us want to own that, but religion is peak denial. Yeah. That's why I say some people were abused mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially, you know. And so, yeah, people can be victims of any of those things. So healing begins when we recognize the wound without allowing it to define us. Thank you, Epic, for mentioning that. Friday we talked about punishment. Punishment. I love y'all's input. Thank you so much, Epic and John London. And too bad Angela's not here today. And Dawn, Mama, Brunya. Thank you. So I hope that I've answered your questions, and been. So Friday we talked about punishment, right? What happens when the pain goes unhealed? That's what happens. So sometimes we begin punishing ourselves. This is when we're self sabotaging typically, but we don't say, I'm going to self sabotage. We say, I'm going to go get drunk. And people say it, I'm going to go get drunk when they're having a bad time. But the reality is that even when we're happy, when we sometimes when we pick up a habit we have a skewed reward system in addiction, you know. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I have to do this." So we were saying that we have a coping mechanism outside of ourselves, but we don't say it to ourselves. We don't say, I'm going to smoke a cigarette because I'm having troubles coping with this. Or I've got, I used to do it. I'd be like, I'm going to have a cigarette and then I'm going to start this. Because I thought somehow I had trained my brain to think that if I smoked a cigarette, I would have more energy. I was really wasting a lot of time, is what I learned about me, that I was wasting a lot of time because it never was just one cigarette in my addiction. Then I would get distracted to something else. And this is a lot of what codependency does too when we're, trying to help somebody else instead of helping ourselves. So when we talk about punishment, when the pain goes unhealed, sometimes we begin punishing ourselves. Sometimes we punish others by giving them the business. Like what I was saying is what is our shortcoming? Our shortcoming is what we do in response to our fear. So if we have a fear, how do we behave towards others? But a lot of times when we don't consider ourselves, this is why, we will like project it out there, and that it's inside of ourselves. We have to own what our fear is. And it may make us cry. And crying is the healthiest expression of that frustration, that being overwhelmed, that feeling of not being good enough. Is we do have to feel it to heal it so that we can feel something else. Because resentment is refelt feelings over and over. And so sometimes we just change different characters for our stories. So that's why it needs to be healed. So we don't just, you feel that every time you think about smoking. Yeah, I used to do it. Thank goodness I quit smoking when I did, because cigarettes are expensive nowadays. But yeah, I quit smoking when they started getting up to close to $3 a pack, y'all. So it's been a while. It's been a while. So anyway, sometimes we silently suffer because we don't believe we deserve peace, and because we don't know how to communicate our pain. Because if we haven't recognized our pain, how do we know how to communicate it? So this is what the tapping helps do, because even if what your pain isn't real today, if it was real before, there's $70 Aussie, but oh my goodness, they're very expensive in America too. I cannot believe how I'm so glad I quit when I did, because yeah. So the tapping, I'll do some tapping today. Let me sit. No, I'm not gonna let you out. I'll let Grinch out after we do tapping, but not while we're doing tapping. Tapping is called emotional freedom technique. So it allows you to feel these feelings that you try to hold in. If you hold your feelings in, 80% of our tobacco market is illegal smokes now. Oh, I can believe it at that price. So oftentimes when we try to hold our feelings in, it causes that toxicity in our body because we're having some toxic feelings. And we don't describe it as toxic. I feel bad, but it could be toxically affecting us if we keep re-feeling these same feelings over and over as resentments. They tell you resentment's like drinking poison, expecting the other person to die. So we need to heal those things. And sometimes getting those resentments out comes out with those tears. So that's healthy, is to cry, not to hold these resentments in, but to feel your feelings, cry about them, write about them. And then what do I want? You know? So sometimes we stay in unhealthy relationships because guilt convinces us that we deserve less. Has anybody done that? I did. So sometimes we try to control people because we're afraid they'll leave us. We're afraid of that abandonment. So we understand the fear, and then we can understand that control would be the shortcoming. What am I doing? Am I spying on them? What am I doing trying to control somebody? Am I having to know where they are every minute? And if they don't call me 5 times a day, am I going to be tripping? And then accusing them of things and telling myself they don't love me because they've missed a phone call, you know? So punishment never heals pain. It simply keeps pain alive. That's why so many Australians go to Japan, I think, much cheaper for everything. Ah, very interesting. Yeah, my friend loves Japan. One of my best friends, she loves Japan. She's like, tried to get me to go. I'm like, I just want to go. I told my bestie this morning, my other bestie, I'm like, look, I'm going to move to Spain with you, live there for a couple of years, and then I'm gonna buy a place in Italy. That's what I think I'm going to do. So it simply keeps pain alive. Punishment never heals pain. So you can't punish another person and then expect you to heal. So what do you want? You know, what do you want? What was it I told her one day? I was like, I'll come up with it in a minute. But anyway, punishment never heals pain. It simply keeps that pain alive. One of my good mates moved to Japan. Think you're right, John. Yeah. Yeah, she loved going over there. So healing requires compassion, boundaries, accountability, and forgiveness. And a lot of times we need to forgive ourselves so we can easy for someone else to say, so we can forgive someone else. Because if we keep going them, then we're going to keep carrying the resentment. There, when we get into acceptance of, like one of my spiritual teachers taught me, when you get a person who's late for everything, as okay, this person is just late for everything, and we don't take it personally, and we decide, do I want to do something with this person? Because if I want to be on time to this thing, I can tell them that, look, I want to be on time to this thing, so I'm going to leave at this time. If you're not here, I'm taking off. That's what we do. Instead of saying, I hate them when they come because they always make us late. So then you're talking smack about them. Then you feel guilty for talking smack about them, right? And then so it's like you end up in this cycle. People are so quick to throw away the way they feel to find the other. Reality is the answer is a balance between all things we feel. That's right, Epic. That's where we create harmony. Black and white. I know that's what I was talking about, the extremes, either this extreme or that extreme. Because the thing is that we do have a lower and higher mind. We do have emotional immaturity, and then we do have emotional immaturity. Wait, emotional maturity and emotional immaturity. So we have all this is within ourselves. A lot of people are trying to find peace out there. This is why addiction is so prevalent. I'm going to find peace out there. You got robbed in Tokyo almost 2 to 3 times. It really gets you down. Ugh. We do live and learn. We sure do. So, yeah. Hello, Avery. It's good to see you here, darling. I'm glad you were able to make it today. So we've been talking about the powerlessness of victimhood and codependency and some of the things that we could do in those things. So we're down to the common thread between all of this, the victimhood, the powerlessness, and how we're going to get to empowerment today. So I'm glad you're here. So what is the common thread? Each conversation asks us to stop giving our power away. You know, whether when we understand when we say they, that's giving your power away. When I asked somebody, and it was how they knew that I was codependent, because when my therapist asked me, Stacy, how are you doing today, or what's going on, I would start talking about they rather than me. So I had to learn to consider myself with therapy. I did not know how. I was codependent. I did not know how to consider myself. I knew how to anticipate and strategize and look for the person's next move, so then I would know what to do. So being empowered means that I know what I want to do, what I'm going to do, and I can negotiate with another person, but I'm not compromising myself, because I often felt the bottom line was later on, whether it be right then or 3 months down the road, I would feel compromised because I gave my power away. So the common thread in this is each conversation asks us to stop giving our power away, stop giving it to the past, stop giving it to fear, stop giving it to guilt, stop giving it to another person's opinion, stop giving it to shame. Because every time we hand someone over something else, someone else's responsibility for our peace. That's what we're doing, is we're handing over to someone else the responsibility for our peace. Peace is within you. Strength is within you. Another person can't give you that. They can match it. But see, a lot of times this is why we end up in these relationships that are one-sided, because we've allowed ourselves to be compromised and we're not matching the same energy back. So we lose sight of our own ability to choose differently because we're running off of another person's choices when we are, being codependent or powerless or setting ourselves up for victimhood. So here's 3 empowerment strategies. 1, practice radical acceptance. Ask yourself, what am I trying to control that isn't mine to control? A lot of codependents do this. A lot of people think that codependency is just somebody depending on another person. It's depending on them for validation. It's dependent on them for love. It's dependent on them to feel secure. And all of this we have to feel within ourselves to show up whole in a relationship. Because in codependency, it's not that you're not whole, but somewhere there's a belief system that, whether it is, like was mentioned earlier, whether it's through religion, whether it's through the family you grew up in, or whether it's through TV, whatever it is, it has made our belief system feel like we are not enough because we don't have that TV romance, or we don't, we're not measuring up to what religion told us we're supposed to do, or even if we're doing what it told us to do, things aren't turning out. I try to be good and things don't turn out that way. I know that I experienced that too. So acceptance simply means seeing clearly what's your part and what's somebody else's part. See, a lot of times in codependency, we don't look at our part because we don't know how, because we've been too busy looking at other people. So you can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. I had to understand that in my codependency, I was looking for security, and it wasn't just financial security, it was emotional security. Thank you, Epic. So Grinch is talking. So we're going to do just a minute. Okay. Well, I'm going to finish these 3 and then I'll show you what tapping looks like. So if you have these negative feelings, to get to the other side, to do it physically, because sometimes when we're having a hissy fit, as we call them in Texas, it's good to say these things to ourselves and not project them onto somebody else. So I'll show you how that's done in a minute. So what am I trying to control that isn't mine? Acceptance isn't approval. Okay, so just because you accept something doesn't mean you approve of it. It means that I accept this. Like I talked about a while ago, if the person's always late, I accept that this person's going to be late and I don't judge them because I don't have an expectation that I'm not going to keep trying to convince myself that I have an expectation that they're going to be on time because they're late. So I have to, in my power, I'm going to say, We're going to leave at 10 o'clock. If you're not here by 10 o'clock, just meet us over there, right? That's setting a boundary. That's acknowledging that I don't like being late. So acceptance simply means seeing reality clearly, and you can't heal what you refuse to acknowledge. So 2 is to become curious instead of critical. Rodolfo, you were codependent in relation to who? I learned codependence from having a codependent mom and an addictive father. And then also religion encourages codependence sometimes because you're just, it teaches, some religions teach people to be a doormat. And so that, was reinforced by religion, trying to feel like I measured up. You're told you're a sinner. You're told you're wrong. Sometimes it can just like pound this into your head. And so also TV, when you watch romantic, relationships on TV, or you watch these TV relationships where people don't know what they want and then they end up together in the end. Sometimes we can think, oh, this is romantic. No, it's not intrusive. Avery, yes, I always feel like I'm approving something. Yes, yes. The reality is a lot of people don't care if we approve of it or not. We need to know if I approve of it for myself or not. So becoming curious instead of critical. So here's how we do this part. Turning you into a doormat was a handy trick before CCTV and police squads. Right? Right? Yeah, now we see. So instead of asking what's wrong with me, ask what happened to me that taught me to think this way. I have a book by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce D. Perry that's called What Happened to You, because if a lot of people are getting prescriptions, and some people really need them. Some people really have chemical imbalances. But sometimes society has taught us to just go to the doctor and get a prescription rather than healing the wound that's inside. You always ask I know I used to ask what was wrong with me, and I even had a thing hanging in my bathroom that said, "You're looking at the problem." But the thing was I had to not learn to not be critical, that my thinking was the problem with the problem, you know? So it's not always our fault, because in recovery, when I first got into recovery, because when I first got into recovery, my sponsor didn't understand codependency. So every time I would tell her what, person who had narcissistic tendencies in my life would say, they're trying to control me and these kind of things, and how I would feel less than. And when I would tell her this, she'd say, honey, what was your part in it? Just because she didn't, she wasn't trying to make it, but I kept thinking everything was my fault. Avery, I did. I would think everything was my fault. And to realize what I'm powerless over was freeing, to understand that I don't have power over other people. I only have power over me, that not everything is my fault, but not everything's not my fault. Like Epic was saying, that right in the middle is harmony. And the gray part is, what did I want? Because when I look at, okay, you chose this. When I say I chose this, because a lot of people go into relationships thinking, I was tricked, I was duped. And I'm not saying you're not. I'm not saying that you're not. I'm not trying to say that you're not. But I'm also saying, when we trust ourselves, we walk into a relationship and we realize that it's a learning experience, even if we get tricked. Rodolfo, Stacy, I never understood what codependency was. I think it was sort of an Al-Anon taught about becoming as sick as an alcoholic, trying to manage and sort their illness. Well, it kind of is too. It started with that, Rodolfo, but what we've started to learn is that, people didn't have to come from an alcoholic environment to have codependency issues. Is that it can be taught as, multi, faceted, is that it can come from many different places. It's a learned behavior. So the good news is that you can unlearn codependency, where some of the chemical imbalances, you can't unlearn those things because those are a chemical imbalance, and there does need to be medicines for chemical imbalances. Codependency is a learned behavior. It can be unlearned. Some of the narcissistic traits can be unlearned. When I was in my addiction, I had narcissistic traits because I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it, and I wanted it right now, instant gratification. And I had to learn to train my central nervous system, because part of that was my central nervous system and the wound from that. Thank you, Avery. You too? Yeah, so it's hard to not mess with our own mind, right? And that's why we're going to do the tapping here in a minute. So what happened to me that taught me to think this way? So when we understand what did I learn growing up? What was the fear? Because a lot of us just grow up and think, I'm not going to be like them. Just like I thought when I first walked into those 12-step rooms, I'm not going to be like them, but I was like them. And I was like my parents too, that I didn't want to be like. So I had to get my own autonomy. And that's what 12 steps or anything is in this life, whether you're in one of those, not everybody's in one of those programs and needs to be, but we all want our own autonomy. But sometimes we give our power away, and just only because we don't know how not to. That's all. It's not, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not stupid, nothing like that. It's just that we don't know our how to get our own autonomy, and we're fighting for it. We're fighting for it at 2 years old. We're fighting for it at 14 years old. And we keep getting an attitude adjustment, right? I don't know about y'all, but we'd get an attitude adjustment when we would try to have our own autonomy as kids, because that's how our parents were trained. Muggle, I've had a few people like that in my life. They've been cut out. Good. Epic. I like what Alan Watts says about needing a psychiatrist. If you need one, you must be insane. There's always a way to find balance holistically. Yeah. Yeah. Because a psychiatrist prescribes, the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is a psychiatrist prescribes medicines. So that's what the need for a psychiatrist is. So my glove, and medicines are for that chemical imbalance, right? So my glob, they were for certain that I didn't have life or could not develop one. Yes, because some people like you, it's very convenient for you to play small for some people, and that's codependency also. That's codependency also, when somebody needs you to play small so they can live large. Avery, yes. So when we understand what happened to me to make me think that I needed to give somebody else more love, more peace, more power than myself. So curiosity creates compassion. Oh, I'm sorry you got to go, Avery. Hopefully you can watch the replay. I'm glad that we got to see you for a little while. Epic. I'm pretty sure chemical imbalances can be regulated by the mind, and we can be our own therapist, just required attitude adjustment. Yeah, we'll do. It's a lot about not learning how to relate with ourselves, right? Epic is it's when we learn what happened to us and we learned what feedback that had in our mind, because like three kids grew up in my house, but we all had different experiences, as Gabor Mate says, is everybody has a different experience. We see the same picture but see it differently. So yeah. Don, on point, Rodolfo, the alcoholic affects the person around them big time. Yes. And Al-Anon, though, we understand you didn't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. So sometimes if you're living with an alcoholic, you might need Al-Anon. You might need Coda. Coda goes a little deeper, because when I went to therapy, my therapist would ask me every week, yes, Epic, replacing fear with curiosity sorts the attitude. It does. Because life on life's terms, life is life, and it's going to be good. And we're going to feel like we're going up, and then we're going to go down, because that's the way life is, like our heartbeat and like our breath. And why are we willing to accept that some things go up and down, but not life on life's terms? So when we understand that life is a reflection of how we think and how we feel, and also, to know what we want, not based on what somebody else wants, our autonomy. So curiosity creates compassion, compassion creates healing, and judgment keeps us stuck, is what happens. So, I won't date somebody who is an alcoholic. I don't even date people, if they drink one drink every once in a while, that'd be cool, but I don't date people who like to party. If they're drinking socially, that would be one thing, but people who like to party, I don't. I can party without alcohol myself. I can have a good time without alcohol. So that's not judgment, that's discernment, because I think it's cool if some people can. I had my day. I did. I had my day. I have partied enough for the rest of my life. So there we grow. So 3, we respond instead of react. Because when we react, that can be our central nervous system in overdrive, and we don't know how to calm ourselves, to self-soothe. Good morning, Dr. Mark. How are you today? Happy Freedom Day to you too. The naughty lady from Shady Lane, Texas. Yep. One of my friends was like, Stacy, you're kind of like Beth Dutton. You're kind of gritty. And I'm like, yeah, but without the alcohol. And she has a lot of healing and wounds to heal too, right? But yeah, I'm cool with being compared to Beth Dutton because I do tell it like it is. And I can be gritty. I don't like back down from things. I don't like necessarily fight with things, but this person, he's had problems with me before, but I don't, he's a big guy too. And I'm just like, well, we're only talking for 3 minutes here. I do not. Let me write that down so I can listen to it, Dr. Mark. The naughty lady from Shady Lane. Do you know who sings it? Okay. So when we respond rather than react, what we do when you're triggered. So it's learning what your trigger is instead of thinking, this is my reality. This always happens. This never happens. This, those absolute comments is that when you're triggered, we pause. Yes, it's about a little girl, actually a baby, but the lyrics make you think otherwise. Dean Martin. I used to watch Dean Martin when I was a little girl. So, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Mark. So, when we're triggered, we need to pause. Just pause a minute. Don't act, you know, because then you're going to have to make an amends if you act. So, this is the thing. This is what I learned about making the amends. If I pause and I breathe and I ask myself, is this my present reality or an old wound? I can get the answers myself. I don't have to react and control, force, or anything on somebody else. I don't even need to defend myself. Sometimes people have, said something about me that wasn't true, and I don't go and confront them and say, I heard you said this about me, because I don't give a, you know what? I don't. You're still a little girl. I love your little girl in your spirit and your heart and soul. Thank you, Dr. Mark. That's quite a compliment, because that's what when people, I tell people I'm an old soul with a childlike spirit. So thank you. That affirms that. So ask yourself, is this my present reality or an old wound? Because most transformation happens in that pause. That's when we can choose another way to react rather than, we can choose to respond rather than react, because nothing changes if nothing changes. So that's where emotional maturity grows, is when we do something different. And that's where freedom begins on this freedom weekend. I know, right? Epic. I'm going to listen. Are y'all going to listen to that song? I'm going to listen to that song, The Naughty Lady from Shady Lane by Dean Martin. That'll be our thing today. So our final thought about that before I show y'all how to tap is this: real empowerment isn't becoming stronger than everyone else. I had to realize that empowerment meant not giving my power to someone else because I wasn't less. When we quit comparing, that's because somebody else was interesting, because somebody else was pretty, didn't mean that I wasn't interesting and pretty. See, that's that either or attitude, that either or that I was talking about earlier. Through the years, I've grown up and I've gotten thicker skin. Not as good as the armor of God, but pretty close. Yeah, that's good. I have too, because I'm like, I had to learn to ask myself, even in this negative self dialogue, right? Dr. Mark is in this negative self dialogue. I try to tell people, is this the way your source would have you talk to yourself? Do you think that, is that how we would talk to ourselves? So I'm going to show tapping here in a minute, that emotional freedom technique, just because sometimes we have negative self dialogue, but that's not a place to stay. It's part of the adventure. It's part of discovery of ourself and why we do what we do. Because if we get sick and tired of being sick and tired and we don't know why I keep doing this, then, emotional freedom technique could help, because feelings aren't facts, but feelings need to be healed. So it's learning your worth was never determined by what happened to you. This is when we understand that we may have been a victim at one time, and we may be giving our power away now in the present because we were a victim one time. But when we can take that adventure to ourselves and learn what our why is, then we can become empowered. So it's learning your worth was never determined by what happened. Your value doesn't need to be earned. You know, a lot of people, we talked the other night, if you didn't catch that live, or was it the day, Friday night? Yeah, we talked about earning respect, is that respect is within you. People don't need to earn respect, and you don't need to earn respect. Respect is in you, just like the peace and the love. That's not outside of you, but sometimes we've been taught that it is outside of us, so we can unlearn that. So your value isn't earned, and it isn't negotiated. It isn't decided by another person. If you were born with it, and you were, the goal isn't to control life, because like I said earlier, life is going to go up and down. It's going to ascend and descend, just like our breath, just like our heartbeat. And that's acceptance, right? When we can get to acceptance of that. Hello, ¿quieres resolución? Or ¿quieres resolución? Cool. Hello. So the goal is to be the kind of person that you want to be, who can meet life honestly. So it's getting honest with yourself and having that courage and compassion and peace, owning that within yourself. But you may have to own the naughty bits, as Dr. Mark says. You may have to own the naughty bits to get to those bits. That not all compassion is, sometimes codependency is what we say is compassion. So it's about understanding and defining our life ourselves. Because when you stop fighting what you can't control, when you stop allowing your wounds to define you, and when you stop punishing others for being human, you finally are free. You're finally free. That freedom is within you. So, acceptance is just, what am I powerless over? Awareness is what wound is driving the behavior, and what healthy action is, what healthy choice can I make today? Just today. Not to overwhelm ourselves and think that we have to be something that we're not, or be somewhere that we're not. We're all where we're supposed to be right now, and not to should on ourselves. So emotional freedom technique looks like this before we get into the 3 A's. Okay. So if you feel like a doormat, it'd be like this. I don't know why I'm always doing everything for everybody else. I just keep doing everything for everybody else, and I feel like nobody does anything for me. I feel so alone sometimes. I feel like they don't want me to be a part of this, part of their events. I invite them to everything, and they never invite me to anything. I don't know why they treat me this way. I guess I'm just a piece of you know what. They think I'm stupid. I think I'm stupid too. And I don't know why this keeps happening to me. I've always been stupid, just like this person said. And I just need to accept that I'm just stupid. But the reality is I have proven to myself that I'm not stupid. I know I'm not stupid. We're all stupid sometimes. And I just hate when I feel stupid. I hate this feeling, and I wish I felt something different. So I'm going to love and forgive myself for giving power over what people think, for giving myself the idea that I'm stupid. I love and forgive myself for who I am. I love and forgive myself for thinking I was any less than anyone else. And I will remember who I am this today, just today. I know that I'm no worse than anybody else. I know I'm no better than anybody else. And I know that I can help myself. I know that I'm smart. I know that I'm good enough. And I know that I deserve to be here. I am worthy, I'm valuable, and I'm divine. So that may look weird, and it looked weird to me the first time that I saw it. But what that does, yeah, I lost some people on that. What that does is it de-escalates your feelings, and you're not sitting here pushing those feelings down like the beach ball, only for them to come back up again. It's actually the best time to do that is when you're crying and slinging snot. Epic says, I find that instead of writing things down, verbalizing both sides of an argument to myself helps me find balance on a topic. Yeah. You don't tap your face. I know you can't always do that. You know what I learned in teaching people this, though, because I used to work with people who were getting plastic surgery. And so, part of that is there's going to be, when people get plastic surgery, a lot of times afterwards there's regret because they feel terrible. A lot of people perceived that they would get plastic surgery and then look like they expected to look right after the plastic surgery. But at first, it's hard because they didn't realize the feelings. See, healing from plastic surgery wasn't just the physical healing from plastic surgery, it was the feelings of not being able to do what you could normally do, the restrictions, you see. And a lot of people, when they had those restrictions were connected to their self esteem. So when they couldn't do what they normally do, they felt terrible because they felt like they weren't worthy because they couldn't. That's where they were getting their worth, was what they could do for other people. So I would talk to people, trust me, like John London, more Japanese visit. Okay. I don't even know about any of that. But so when I was working with people, I would teach them the tapping. Some people I work with have had weight loss surgery. And so they too would do the tapping because the weight loss surgery in itself didn't take away the desire to eat if that was their coping skill. So there still needed to be that mindset change. So that's how, the tapping helps a great deal with those kind of things. So I used to gear it towards the feelings of the worth and the feelings of this and all of this. So here we go into the 3 A's. It's good to see you, Robbie. We're going into the 3 A's of empowerment now. So acceptance. So when we look at acceptance, what is true that I need to stop fighting? Because a lot of people are fighting. They keep having the same fight over and over. And what I've shared with y'all is sometimes it's control. And I have to ask myself, are my control issues bumping up against somebody else's control issues? And how can I not be trying to control? The process behind tapping is to de-escalate the feelings, Dr. Mark. So when we do the tapping and acknowledge our own feelings, instead of, a lot of people use their body language. When we talked about silent suffering earlier and that shortcoming, so a lot of people use the body language, and when they get hurt or upset or wounded, they go, but they keep just getting hurt and upset and wounded over the same thing. So what it does, like Epic was saying, is verbalizing your feelings, because a lot of times people just don't know how to verbalize their feelings. This has really helped a great deal with people who have suffered from, abuse as children, been violated as children. And so they don't know how to express their feelings. In the Body Keeps the Score, they talk about that when a child is, suffered abuse, that there's a part in their brain that just shuts down, that doesn't communicate, doesn't know how to communicate, because the child doesn't know how to deal with this stuff. So that part of the brain has to learn the words and the feelings. So a lot of the people that I have worked with in that kind of thing, I'll ask them, did you write a letter to your perpetrator or the predator? And they'll be like, no, they don't know what to say. So when we do the tapping, they're able to get their words back. And what it does is it spirals, if you notice the movement of it, and then you shut down exactly. Yeah. So when you notice the movement, what it does is they get to feel their feelings and say their feelings, because so many people shove the feelings down. They're having this war within themselves, as the higher self is saying, you're worthy, you're valuable. And the lower self is saying, whatever the old tapes were. Some people were I talked about that Friday night or Wednesday, I can't remember, but some people were verbally abused as children. And so they repeat that verbal abuse to themselves and think that that's who they are. And so to break that, to be able to get it out there and just say it and to feel that feeling, because a lot of people, when we started tapping, they began crying. And crying is the most healthy way to release our feelings rather than getting angry and lashing out and reacting to somebody. So once we learn how to tap and get those feelings out, we can own our own feelings. So that was a lot being said about that. Was that helpful, Dr. Mark? No, no, because I don't smoke cigarettes. That's what started the whole conversation, Robbie, was about the cigarettes being cheaper in Japan. And I know it's a beautiful country, but I've only got so much time, probably, and that could be on a list later, but I have my list. So I didn't do Japan, but what started it was the cigarettes are cheaper in Japan. So acceptance. Acceptance is not approval. Just because we accept something about somebody doesn't mean we approve of it. Forgiveness for me, I can forgive the person, but not the act. Thank you so much, Dr. Mark. I'm glad. I hope that it was helpful because if you noticed, it spiraled and the spiral de-escalated as they were able to feel their feelings. Because a lot of times when people cried, right, growing up is, I don't know if you were told that, but you were told you were going to get something to cry about if you cried. And then oftentimes it's like dried up, and really that's not healthy. That's not healthy. Epic was telling her about the price. Yes, yes. Thanks, Epic, for letting him know what we were talking about there. Ah, so you were shocked in grammar school. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So acceptance is not approval. It doesn't mean that we approve of a behavior. Acceptance is how do I feel? Acceptance is me, accepting myself. And then when I accept myself and my flaws and my errors and imperfections, I'm not holding somebody else to a bar. And it doesn't mean that I'm accepting theirs either. It's that I know that if I'm aligned with it or not. This is how you become with discernment, is we're not trying to control another person, to accept us, or not trying to control ourselves to accept them. I was not abused ever. Oh my goodness. That would change. Yeah, I imagine that. Oh, that would be hard. I can't even imagine. I mean, I wasn't going to say that I imagine how that, but that would be hard. I can't even imagine. But I would think that I would be very scared for a while, have a lot of fear, in that, especially, yeah. So acceptance is not approval. Acceptance is not giving up. It's not saying I throw in the towel. That's not acceptance. Acceptance is seeing reality as it is instead of as we wish it were or as we think that it is. Seeing it as it is. And this is why we do the breathing, is because you get into the present moment in your central nervous system. Like I would imagine, Dr. Mark, that affects your central nervous system. The central nervous system won't be trying to anticipate and strategize. Instead, the central nervous system gets a chance to relax and to accept the breath in and accept the breath out. If you ever notice when people are upset, they're like da 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 da, and they don't hardly take a breath. And so, accepting a breath in, even. So this is where we admit what we're powerless over. I cannot change the past. We can make an amends, and what that amends does is we acknowledge the harm that we did, and then we behave differently. We don't keep doing the same thing over. We acknowledge the harm. I regret that I behaved this way, and I'm working on it. And then you really work on it. You may need a coach, a therapist, somebody to work on it, but you really work on it because we can't see ourselves differently sometimes with our own eyes. We'll have a lot, believe those lies. Dr. Mark, I grew up in a very tough neighborhood in New York. But as they say, it's true. If it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. Yes, absolutely, Dr. Mark. Thank you for sharing that. I had a client that he grew up over there too in New York, and I think it was the Bronx. And he went outside when he was a kid, and there was a bullet that flew by. I know that struggle is real, and there was a bullet that flew by, and we're working on changing his patterns to where he feels safe, because it's hard to feel safe when you live in that kind of neighborhood. But you're right, God helps, but we also need to retrain our central nervous system for safety. So when we realize that I can't control another person's choices, I can't force someone to love me, I can't make someone understand me, and I can't heal someone who doesn't want healing. So a lot of codependent people are trying to heal people who don't even want healing, and then they feel defeated. And that doesn't feed their psyche very well either. So when we stop arguing with reality, we free up energy for what we can change. Empowerment begins with acceptance, awareness. So I'm trying to get to the story here, because I don't know how many still here. I want cold hard cash as an amends to me. Rodolfo, well, that would be nice, but we don't always get that. So sometimes it's a change in behavior. Like if you're dealing with people who ignore you or stress you out, if they could acknowledge I can do tree fitty. Yeah, tree fitty. I get it now. Tree fitty. Awesome. Deal. Is it $3.50 or $350? So, what is driving my behavior? To get curious with ourselves. Awareness asks us to become curious instead of critical. Instead of asking what's wrong with me, like Avery was talking about earlier, we ask what happened that taught me to react this way. If we're ashamed of our behavior and we need to make an amends for it. So awareness helps us identify. So that we have to ask what happened, why we behave this way and behave differently. Understand that that fear caused a shortcoming. So awareness helps us to identify old wounds, fears, attachment styles, limiting beliefs, guilt, shame, and survival strategies. Awareness is where the healing begins because we can't change what we refuse to see. Carl Jung said, until you make a unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Okay. So the action. We're about to get to the story, y'all. Now that I know better, what healthy choice can I make today? Action isn't perfection. It's one healthy choice at a time. Dr. Mark, I truly believe that God gives us the same things that doctors give us. They give us the prescription, the tools, and the necessities, and then we have to learn how to use them to heal ourselves. Yep. Yep. It does help to have a spiritual belief system. It does, like that childlike spirit. It helps us to connect with our spirit to have a, belief system. So maybe, I mean, I got God too, but we have so many people from different places here. Epic, no religion. Right. So maybe today your action is setting a boundary, apologizing, forgiving yourself, asking for help, saying no. These are simple things you could do in a day. Telling the truth. Robbie, thanks, Epic. I didn't know why, John London. Okay. So maybe today your action is setting a boundary, apologizing, forgiving yourself, asking for help, saying no, telling the truth, taking a walk instead of numbing, choosing peace instead of punishment. Healing doesn't happen through insight alone. You can't just intellectualize it like what Epic said earlier. You can't just intellectualize healing. You have to feel it to heal it. And that's why that tapping helps best when you're crying and slinging snot because you're really in the rawness of your emotions. It happens through consistent action, small actions, repeated consistently. It's not just thinking that I'm going to do this once and then everything's going to be fine and divine because it's practice and development. So small actions repeated consistently create lasting transformation. So one, the empowerment formula is acceptance. I stop fighting reality. Awareness. I understand why I react the way I do. And action. I choose a healthier response, and that is empowerment. So yeah, Robbie, if you watch it over, you'll see the context of what John London and Epic and I were saying, because I was talking about I used to smoke. And sometimes people think, oh, I'll smoke a cigarette and then I'm going to do this. So when we look at what our coping skills are, so that's what we started with. So in closing, when we accept what we can't control, we stop wasting our energy. When we become aware of what has been driving us, we stop living on autopilot because it's not life living on default. You just react, anticipate, strategize. Just that wears a person out, y'all. So when we take healthy action, we begin creating a life that reflects who we are truly instead of what happened to us. Because people are acting like, sometimes I can be sitting in recovery or in those meetings and I can see the adults, when I see somebody, like I can see their parents, what they're healing from, I can see the parents sitting at the table rather than who they are, because sometimes we take on those personas. So that's empowerment, is knowing who we are, not becoming someone new, but becoming more of who you were always. It's okay. It's okay. It's just that it was in the flow of the conversation. So acceptance gives us peace. Okay. Acceptance gives us peace, awareness gives us clarity, and action gives us freedom. Lonnie Lucas, you got here a little late, but what we're talking about is victimhood and powerlessness, and we stay on topic, okay? But you're welcome to be here, and hopefully if you feel this will help you, which there's not much left, where it's story time, so there's not much time left. But hopefully you'll be able to get something out of this. So there's two children in this story with two different stories, okay? So here we go. Ethan grew up in a beautiful house. Ethan grew up in a beautiful house. The lawn was always manicured. Somebody in here said everything looked perfect on the outside, but struggled on the inside. So the lawn was always manicured. His clothes were always clean, and dinner was always on the table. From the outside, people, it's okay. So from the outside, people thought he had the perfect childhood. But what they couldn't see was the silence. His parents were emotionally unavailable. Everything revolved around appearances, achievement, and control. And love felt conditional. Praise came only when he excelled. And mistakes were met with criticism and withdrawal. Thank you so much, Dr. Mark. I appreciate that. And I'm going to look that song up. Are you leaving us? Are you going to? But we're going to breathe here shortly. I'm almost done. But thank you so much. I appreciate you. I always appreciate your input. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So what they couldn't see when people saw all this perfectness on the outside of his house, of Ethan's house, was what they couldn't see was the silence, the non-communication. You know, I told you his parents only complimented him when he excelled. Mistakes were met with criticism and withdrawal. So this is where we get into that silent suffering, is we all make mistakes, right? So he was met with criticism and withdrawal. So what do you think happened in his adult relationships? When Ethan cried, he was told he was too sensitive. When he had an opinion, he was reminded that children should be seen and not heard. Slowly, he learned that emotions weren't safe. If he could control his environment and anticipate everyone's reactions and never appear vulnerable, maybe he wouldn't feel so invisible, because he felt invisible growing up in a home like that. And so control became his protection, not because he wanted power, because he was terrified of feeling powerless again. Oh, well. Leo Lee, hello. Do you feel like people push others away to get a sense of control? They keep pushing until they get exactly what they want, to be alone, and they hate it, but they've pushed everyone away. Yes, because Leo Lee, that's a good question. They're trying to prove something to themselves. So a lot of times they have a self-loathing deep inside of them. I have a friend that's doing that right now. I think she's relapsed, is what she's done. She's relapsed on, pharmaceutical drugs. She's relapsed. She's taken too many. And so she's pushing us all away because she has this narrative going on in her mind that, that we're all against her, and no one's all against her. We don't want her destroying herself, because that's self-destructive, that's self-sabotage. And so she thinks everyone's against her, and we're not. But yet at the same time, she's proven that nobody's there for her, because she's pushing us away. Exactly what you're saying. Because sometimes when people are trying to self-loathe, that's what they do. So when we look up self-loathing, that's what self-loathing would look like to a degree. So across town, Mia's childhood, that's a very good question, Leo Lee. Was that helpful? Because yes, it's true. And this is what I say. Sometimes people are punishing themselves, and that person is punishing themselves, but they won't say, I'm punishing myself. Today we're discussing, we're wrapping up the week. We talked about powerlessness, and we talked about victimization and these kind of things this week. So we're wrapping it up from powerlessness to empowerment. So thank you, Salma. I'm almost done today. We're doing the story. You got here in time for the finishing of story time, but hopefully you'll get to rewatch this if you missed the whole thing, because there was a lot of good nuggets. A lot of people had some great comments in here. And so hopefully you can watch the replay. Okay. But hang in here. We're about to get to the breathing here shortly. So across town, so we just talked about Ethan's childhood, about how he grew up in a silent house where everything was perfect on the outside and he only got recognized if he did something good. So this taught him to control things so that he, would feel like he could be seen. So across town, Mia's childhood looked very different. There was no predictability. Some days there was laughter, but other days there were slammed doors, broken promises, addiction, and chaos. She never knew which version of home she was going to be walking into. As a little girl, she believed if she could just be good enough, she didn't rock the boat. She learned to walk on eggshells. Leo Lee. Same with addiction. They used to get control over their lives because they feel like they can't control anything, so they control their pain with addiction. Exactly. It's doing that same thing, expecting different results. It's the insanity of, addiction is a disease, and the insanity of the disease of addiction is that they're trying to feel better, but they keep feeling worse because the pain keeps getting intensified, because eventually you got to feel it to heal it, that pain. So like Epic was saying earlier, you can't just intellectualize it. We have to feel it to heal it. And the best way to do that is through tears, because sometimes we do get overwhelmed and sometimes we do get frustrated. It's the most healthy way to feel that pain is through tears, rather than lashing out at somebody else. Because, what we do in our emotional immaturity when we haven't learned how to express our pain is we tend to point it on somebody else. Hurt people hurt people. So as a little girl, she believed if she could just be good enough, helpful enough, pretty enough, quiet enough, someone would finally choose her. Someone would stay. Someone would become the peacemaker. So she became the peacemaker. No, they have no control over their life, so they give themselves pain because in some delusional sense, pain and suffering is something they can control themselves. I know, Leo Lee. I have 29 years clean and sober. So yeah. And it was like doing the same thing, trying to fit in too. This acceptance has been part of our tools we talked about today. Is that none of these two kids here that I'm talking about in this story, they did not learn how to accept themselves. And so they could take the edge off through, sometimes people use food to take the edge off. So addiction isn't just restricted to alcohol and drugs. Addiction can go with food, addiction can go with shopping, and it's using something outside of ourselves to bring comfort, to bring peace, to touch with their spirit. But it doesn't. It ends up swallowing them. All right, Cruz. You're welcome to be here if you're going to be nice, because I'm finishing up this talk and it's about healing and empowerment, changing powerless to power empowerment. But if you don't be nice, I'm going to put you out, okay? But you're welcome to stay and hear this story. All right, so someone would finally choose her. Someone would stay. So she became the peacemaker. Bye-bye. All right, so she became the peacemaker, the fixer. Leo Lee, for anyone who doesn't know what I mean, addicted's chewing gum. Yes, you can get addicted. I know when I like something, I can become addicted. I was just sharing earlier that I had to make myself write sentences because in Texas, and I had a client do it because not to punish ourselves. In school, we think we're getting punished when we have to write sentences. But I have given myself the assignment of writing sentences because in Texas, they got some Bluebell ice cream. And in this Bluebell ice cream, and some of the people who are over there doing the sports thing have run into this Bluebell ice cream. This Bluebell ice cream in Texas is something else. And I had to write sentences on my whole page of paper. I will not eat ice cream. I will not eat ice cream. I will not, because I ate a whole pint of that Bluebell ice cream. I had no business eating that whole pint of Bluebell ice cream. So you're right. Gum. It can. Oh, okay. Okay. You chew gum. That's good. Gum is good to chew. Ice cream will put pounds on. Gum is good. Ice cream, Not all ice cream is bad. I get ice cream today, but I only get a scoop and a thing. I don't put it in my refrigerator. I do not. In Mexico, having ice cream is a thing because it's hard to get it home to the refrigerator, but it's not impossible. Thanks, Rodolfo. So the one who apologized, even when she had done nothing wrong. See, some people, I've worked with people and I did it myself. I used to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And this was a learned behavior just to keep there from being any chaos or trauma or drama. It's just saying, I'm sorry. Like when we got whoopings when we were a kid, when my dad would get the belt out, we would start screaming before the belt hit our buns. You know what I mean? We'd start, he'd get hold of that arm and we'd already, as soon as he took hold of that arm, we'd be like, ah! So worth became something to earn instead of something she already possessed. You see, so some of us think we have to earn respect, earn our worth. And no, you were born with those things. Those are things that eventually, for whatever reason, the old tapes, the belief systems might have taken it away. Like I said, media can do it, your family can do it, religion can do it, all kinds of things can, make us feel like we're less than. So years later, Ethan and Mia met. Ooh. At first, it felt like magic. Mia admired how confident and decisive Ethan seemed. Now, chewing gum helps the dry mouth and coping withdrawal, dry mouth. Oh, but so you understand addiction too. Yeah. So I see what you're saying now. Yeah. Yep. Yep, it does. And, when it's alcohol, it's also good too because we crave sugar with alcohol and gum has sugar in it. So that's good too. But yeah, definitely. I'm glad you're getting the gum, Leo Lee. So thank you. I was confused for a minute, but I'm not now. So I thought you were saying we were addicted to gum at first. And I was like, well, yeah, I could be addicted to anything, but I get it. So Mia admired how confident and decisive Ethan seemed. For the first time, life felt stable. Ethan admired how loving and attentive Mia was. For the first time, he felt important. So neither realized they weren't falling in love with each other, though. That's not what they realized. They were falling in love with how the other soothed their childhood wounds. As time passed, old fears quietly returned. Usually I tell people that, like, in 3 months, people start showing their true colors. And if they've slept together in that 3 months, typically they settle then. They'll settle for this person's behavior and be like, I don't know about this. So they're at their 3 to 6 months part, probably Ethan and Mia, because then our wounds start coming out later because our higher self comes out in the beginning. That's not to say we were tricked. We have a higher self, the persons that we want to be in the beginning. But then, it's not like black and white, like was mentioned earlier. Then we have our darker selves. All of us have positive and negative within us. It's not like I'm all positive and they're all negative. It's not like that. We all have that. And so we're like atoms and molecules bumping up against each other. And whatever one person feels like they're lacking, the other person has. And then y'all get the picture, right? So whenever Mia needed reassurance, Ethan felt controlled when these quiet fears returned. Whenever Ethan pulled away, Mia felt abandoned. So the more anxious she became, the more she reached for him. Y'all ever had these relationships? And the more she reached, the more he withdrew. So she interpreted distance as rejection. He interpreted closeness as losing control. Neither intended to hurt the other. That wasn't the intention. Okay. So neither understood that they were dancing to music written long before they met. Okay. She kept trying to prove she was worthy of love. And he kept trying to control the environment so he wouldn't have to feel vulnerable. The relationship became less about the present and more about protecting the past. One day, after another painful argument, they finally stopped blaming each other long enough to ask different questions. Not, why are you doing this to me? But what happened to you before we met? to be able to see each other. Because this is what I mean. Sometimes people get together after 10, 15, 20 years and they still don't see each other. Okay. They've learned to settle into this routine and they're unhappy. They have to learn to communicate again. So for the first time, Ethan talked about growing up unseen. For the first time, Mia admitted that she had spent her whole life trying to earn love. And neither story excused the hurt that they had, had, the hurt that they had caused each other. But understanding replaced accusation. Compassion replaced judgment. Healing finally had somewhere to begin. They were both feeling seen, right? So because the problem had never been that one was broken and the other wasn't. Good morning, JR. It's good to see you. The problem was that two wounded children had become adults who loved each other with survival strategies instead of healed hearts. So the greatest act of love wasn't changing each other. They didn't need to change each other. It was each person becoming willing to heal themselves. Grinch is really talking, isn't he? So only then could control become trust. Only then could proven become belonging. And only then could love stop asking, will you heal my childhood? Because a lot of people don't realize they're getting into relationships because they want somebody to heal their childhood. And we have to heal our own wounds. And that's empowerment. So, and begin saying, instead of saying, well, you heal my childhood, saying, I'll take responsibility for healing my own so I can love you freely. Robbie says, I think you misunderstand what I was trying to explain to John London. Why would Australians go to Japan to buy cigs when we can buy them? That's what he was saying too. He said that that's what somebody else was saying, that you can buy them on the black market. Was that Epic? Was that you saying that, Epic? So Robbie. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. So acceptance, taking responsibility for our own healing so we can love freely, right? So we're not having expectations of another person to give us something that we already have within ourselves, but we're looking for them. That's a lot of pressure to put on another person. So acceptance is, this is what happened to me. And awareness is this is how it shaped the way that I love. And action is, this is how I choose to heal instead of repeating the pattern. That's the end of the story. So did anybody relate with the stories, or, with Emma, Mia and Ethan, or was today helpful? Leo Lee, are you still here? So yeah, that's what's cool about Zoom. And I have I'm going to be, I know some of you don't have Facebook, but I'm on Facebook. And I'm going to be having a subscription on Facebook. It's like $10 a month because I know not everybody can afford coaching. But this is $10 a month, what I have on Facebook for people who want it, like twice a month on Thursdays, every other Thursday. I'll be going, having a Zoom meeting to where I can see people, because it is hard to understand people when you can't see people and you're just seeing the text falling through. And I'm reading this and reading that. So I apologize on my part to where I may sometimes misunderstand something, because I'm trying to stay in the present so I can keep the flow going and everything. So yeah, so I sometimes don't understand what's being said. And even when I am in the present, obviously with like Leo Lee, wasn't getting it, so I appreciate all the comments here today, all of them, even if I didn't understand. Helpful. Thank you, Rodolfo, because it's a community, it's a family, and we're building, and we do all uplift each other and everything. So yeah, I appreciate you all being here when you could spend your time somewhere else. And I know, so when you're here, that makes my heart happy, because the reason I'm charging that $10 on Facebook is I have created content before, and, it was just me talking to myself, and I don't want to create content so I can talk to myself, because sometimes people would come in, sometimes they wouldn't. And I really can't help anybody if they just sometimes show up, because it's not going to be lasting. So all of you who show up here on a weekly basis, we get to connect, and that connection helps us to be thoughtful and to understand, because yes, there's misunderstanding and understanding, mistakes and retakes. Life isn't just black or white, like what was said earlier by Epic. So I don't know who all is still here. Thank you, Rodolfo, for letting me know this was helpful to you. It's helpful to me to be able to get in front of you. If you want the every other week group coaching to where we see each other on Zoom, if you go to my Facebook page, Stacy Renee, you can subscribe to my channel, and I will send you a Zoom link so we can connect every other Thursday night. Now, see, except for holidays. So obviously for America's Thanksgiving in November, I might miss that Thursday. So it would only be one Thursday in the month. But for $10, for people who aren't sure if they want coaching, they could kind of get in there and see if they're interested in coaching. People who like community, if they want just support, you can get in there and just get support. So it's Stacy Renee on Facebook. Okay. All right. So let's breathe, darlings. Let's, for whatever we do today, breathe freedom in and breathe constraint out, where we feel stoved in our bodies and everything else. So I thank you so much for being here this morning. And I hope that it was helpful, that you are going to feel empowered as you head through your week this week. All right. All right. Let's breathe, darlings. Let's take a deep breath in. Hold it. And release. Just do your best. Breathe in. Hold it. And release. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. Just two more. Breathe in. Hold it. Release. I can feel my heartbeat. Can y'all feel your heartbeat? Breathe in. Hold it. And release. All right. Thank y'all again so much for being here. Much love and appreciation. And I'll be back here tomorrow night. If you all ever have any ideas on a topic that you want me to cover, I could research it and see if I know. Maybe I know about it. Maybe I just need to research it, because I hope that you all get to learn something here, and I get to learn things here too. Like today, the assignment would be is looking up this song, "The Naughty Lady from Shady Lane" by Dean Martin, that Dr. Mark had suggested that we look up. I always appreciate your suggestions, and I appreciate your participation in this. So thank you so much. I hope you're going to have a super Sunday the rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you so much. Okay, you too, JR. Thank y'all so much for being here. Thank you for the hearts. I appreciate that. Thank y'all. Y'all are amazing. All right. Y'all have an amazing day, okay? Super Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Thank you for all the goodies flying up. It's hard to leave when I see all the stuff flying up. Grinch. Oh, let me let the Grinch out to come tell y'all bye. Hold on. Hold on, Grinch. Come tell everybody bye. Come on. Come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on. Oh, he's fighting with me. Okay. You mad because we didn't tap with you? Come on. There Grinch is. All right. Thank y'all so much. Right, Grinch? Say love y'all. Thank y'all. All right. I will see y'all tomorrow night.